The drive back from my cardiologist's office takes exactly 22 minutes if you catch the lights on Meridian right. I know because I've made that drive every 3 months for the past 4 years. Ever since my doctor found that irregular rhythm and put me on the blood thinner. I know the way the afternoon light falls across the overpass. I know which lane to be in at the corner of 5th and Hargrove. I know the sound my turn signal makes when I pull onto Crestwood Lane, the little street where my wife and I had lived for 31 years. That Tuesday in October, I almost didn't see the note. It was tucked under my windshield wiper, folded once, written in the kind of hurried handwriting you use when you don't have much time. I almost pulled it off and tossed it without reading it, the way I do with the pizza flyers and the lawn service cards. But something made me stop. Maybe it was the paper. It was torn from a legal pad, the kind my neighbor always kept on his kitchen counter. Maybe it was the ink, thick, blue, pressed hard like it mattered. Don't go inside. Come to my house first. I have something you need to see. Russell. I sat in my car for a long moment. The engine ticked. A mockingbird screamed from somewhere in the oak tree at the edge of my driveway. I looked at my front door, the same red door my wife had picked out in 1993 because she said it made the house look welcoming. And something in my chest went tight that had nothing to do with my heart condition. I put the car in reverse and pulled into Russell's driveway next door. He was waiting for me on his porch before I even got the door open. Russell is 71, a retired postal inspector, and the kind of man who notices things for a living. He had that look on his face he gets when something is wrong. The same look he'd had the morning he knocked on my door to tell me my back fence had been cut. He didn't say hello. He just held open his screen door and said, "Come in. Sit down." His living room smelled like coffee and the cedar he keeps in his closet. His wife passed 6 years ago and he lives alone, neat as a pin. The way some men get when they've lost the person who made the mess feel worthwhile. He set a laptop on the coffee table and turned it toward me. "Before I show you this," he said, "I want you to know I wasn't spying. I installed that camera after the package thefts on the block last spring. It covers my driveway and part of the street. I didn't know it was going to catch what it caught. I told him I understood. I told him to show me." He pressed play. The timestamp read 2 weeks earlier, a Thursday, 11:14 inches the morning. I had been at my woodworking class at the community center. I go every Thursday, have for 2 years. It keeps my hands busy now that I'm retired. The footage was from Russell's front camera, angled slightly toward the street, and it showed my driveway clearly enough. A gray sedan I didn't recognize pulled up and parked at the curb. The driver stayed in the car. Then my front door opened and my wife came out. And behind her came a man I had never seen before, tall, maybe 50, wearing a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and they stood together on my porch and talked for several minutes, closed the way people stand when they already know each other well. Then she handed him something, an envelope. He put it in his jacket pocket, touched her elbow, and walked back to the sedan. Russell paused the video. "That's not the first time," he said. "That's just the first time I thought to check the footage." He showed me 3 more clips. 4 visits over 6 weeks. Always on a Thursday. Always when I was at woodworking. I asked him who the man was. "I don't know for certain," Russell said. "But I ran the plate the last time he came." He slid a piece of paper across the table. A name. An address in a subdivision about 12 miles east of us. And a title. Senior Associate. Hartfield and Greer, Estate Planning. An estate attorney. I sat with that for a moment. My wife and I had our wills done years ago, through a firm downtown we'd used since we were in our 40s. I had not been told about any changes. I had not signed anything new. I had not been asked. "There's one more thing," Russell said. He pulled up a different file on his laptop, not a video this time. "My daughter works at the county courthouse. Clerk's office. I asked her to run your name last week because I had a bad feeling and I wanted to be wrong." He turned the screen toward me. It was a filing, a petition. The language was formal and cold, and it took me a moment to understand what I was reading, the way you sometimes have to read something twice when your brain doesn't want to accept it the first time. My wife had petitioned the court to have me declared legally incapacitated. The petition cited my heart condition, my medication, and what it described as increasing episodes of confusion and erratic behavior. It was supported by a signed affidavit. The signature at the bottom was my son's. I don't remember driving home that night. I remember sitting in Russell's driveway for a long time. I remember the mockingbird again. I remember thinking about the last time my son and I had sat together easily Thanksgiving 2 years ago, before things started to go cold between us, before the phone calls got shorter and the visits stopped, before he started looking at me the way you look at someone you've been told not to trust. My son is 34 years old. He works in commercial real estate in Atlanta. He is his mother's child in ways I had always found charming. The same directness, the same certainty about things. I had never once thought that certainty could be pointed at me. I am 63 years old. I spent 38 years as a structural engineer. I have designed bridges and overpasses and retaining walls in 4 states. I know how to read a load-bearing diagram. I know when something is built to fail. I drove home. My wife was making dinner. The kitchen smelled like the rosemary chicken she makes every Tuesday. She kissed me on the cheek and asked how my appointment went. And I told her the doctor said everything was fine, which was true. And I sat down at the kitchen table and watched her move around the kitchen with the ease of someone who doesn't know they've been seen. That night I slept in my own bed and I did not let my face change. The next morning, after she left for her book club, I called my attorney. Not the estate firm. My attorney, the one who handled my father's probate. The one who had done the contract review when I sold my engineering practice 6 years ago. A woman named Patricia, who I had known for 20 years, and who I trusted more than almost anyone alive. She called me back within the hour. I told her everything. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Don't move any money, don't sign anything, and don't have any conversations with your wife about finances. Can you come in tomorrow?" I could. What Patricia found over the next 10 days was methodical and patient, and, in its own way, almost impressive. The way a termite infestation is almost impressive before you realize your house is hollow. Our joint brokerage account had been quietly drained over 14 months. Not all at once, that would have triggered alerts. Small transfers, 800 here, 2,000 there, spread across enough time that the statements looked unremarkable if you weren't adding them up. The total came to just over $240,000. It had gone into an account I had never seen, in my wife's name alone, opened at a bank in a different county. The estate attorney from Russell's footage, the one my wife had been meeting on Thursdays, had been preparing new documents, a revised trust, a power of attorney that, if I were declared incapacitated, would give my wife full control of everything we owned. The house, the retirement accounts, the investment portfolio I'd spent 30 years building. The incapacity petition was the key to all of it. Without it, even as my spouse, she couldn't touch certain accounts unilaterally. With it, she could do anything she wanted, and I would have no legal standing to object. Patricia explained all of this to me, sitting across her conference table, and she used words like elder financial abuse and fraud in a matter-of-fact tone that I appreciated because I was having a hard time holding myself together and I didn't need anyone's sympathy right then. I needed someone who could think clearly, because I was finding it difficult to do that myself. It wasn't the money. I want to be clear about that. It was 31 years. It was the red door. It was every road trip and every argument about the thermostat and every Sunday morning where we sat on the back porch with coffee and didn't need to say anything. It was all of that turned into a legal document designed to take everything I had left and hand it to a woman who had looked me in the eye every single day and felt nothing. And it was my son's signature on that affidavit. That was the part I kept coming back to at 2 a.m. when sleep wouldn't come. What had she told him? What version of me had she built in his mind, piece by piece, over however long this had been going on? What had I missed? What had I failed to see? Patricia told me I needed to be strategic. She told me we had enough to file a response to the incapacity petition, and that doing so would essentially freeze all proceedings while the court investigated. She told me the financial transfers were potentially criminal. She told me I should not confront my wife. Not yet. Because the moment she knew I knew, assets could move and documents could disappear. I went home and I was kind to my wife for 3 more weeks. I ate the rosemary chicken. I asked about her book club. I told her, My heart felt fine. I also, on Russell's advice, installed 3 new cameras of my own. Small ones, the kind you can monitor from your phone. One facing the home office where my wife kept her personal laptop. One in the hallway near the filing cabinet. One in the garage. I am an engineer. I understand systems. I understand the value of documentation. On a Wednesday evening, while I was ostensibly watching the game in the living room, my wife sat down at her desk and made a phone call. I couldn't hear the conversation, but the camera showed her opening the filing cabinet, pulling out a folder, the kind I recognized as our financial documents, and photographing several pages with her phone. Russell's daughter at the courthouse had been quietly monitoring the incapacity case filing. She told Russell, who told me, that a hearing date had been set, 12 days out. I went back to Patricia. I laid everything on the table, the footage from Russell's camera, the transfer records she had already compiled, the new footage from my garage camera, the copy of the incapacity petition with my son's signature, the estate attorney's name, and the documentation of the Thursday meetings. Patricia looked at all of it and said, "We're ready." The morning before the hearing, Patricia filed a counter-petition. It was 47 pages long, and it included financial records, surveillance footage, transaction histories, and a formal complaint to the state attorney's office alleging elder financial fraud. She also filed a motion to have the incapacity petition reviewed as potentially fraudulent given the financial circumstances, and she sent a copy of the counter-filing, along with a personal letter she had drafted, to my son's address in Atlanta. I don't know exactly when my son read it. I know it was sometime that afternoon, because at 4:17 p.m., my phone rang, and it was him, and the first thing he said was, not hello. The first thing he said was, "Dad." He was crying. My son is not a man who cries easily. He got that from me, and the sound of it did something to me I can't fully describe. I sat down on the back porch steps, the ones I've been meaning to refinish for 2 years, and I held the phone and I listened. He told me what his mother had told him, that I had been forgetting things, that I had become paranoid and difficult, that I had accused her of things without reason, that the doctors were worried, that she was only trying to protect the family's finances before something happened to me and everything fell apart. She had fed him these pieces slowly, over months, the way you build a case not all at once, but steadily, in the pauses between other conversations, until the picture she wanted him to see was the only picture he had. He had believed her because she was his mother, and because he lived 12 hours away, and because he didn't know what he didn't know. I told him I understood. I told him I was not angry at him. I told him both of those things were true, which they were, even though one of them was harder than the other. He flew in 2 days later. We sat on the back porch with coffee, and I showed him the documentation, not to punish him or prove a point, but because he deserved to know what was real. He went through the bank records. He watched the footage from Russell's camera, his mother on the porch with the estate attorney, handing over the envelope, the easy, familiar way they stood together. He read his own affidavit, the one he had signed based on what she had told him, and his face did something quiet and terrible. "She told me you'd been having episodes," he said. "She said you'd gotten lost driving home from the grocery store." I told him I had never gotten lost. I told him I still knew every light on Meridian. He put the papers down and looked out at the yard and said, "What do you need from me?" I told him I needed him to be willing to make a statement correcting his affidavit. I told him I needed him to tell the truth. He did. The court proceedings took 4 months. I won't walk through every session because much of it was procedural and cold, and the kind of thing that makes you understand why people say the legal system is not built for grief. But here is what happened in the end. The incapacity petition was dismissed. The court found it had been filed under materially false pretenses, supported by testimony that my son himself later recanted and corrected. The financial fraud investigation, handled by the state attorney's office, resulted in charges against my wife and the estate attorney. The attorney was disbarred pending the outcome of his criminal case. My wife pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of financial exploitation of an elderly person. A charge that still feels surreal to read, because I am not the kind of man who thinks of himself as elderly, and I am certainly not the kind of man who expected to be a victim. The plea came with 3 years probation, substantial fines, and a court order requiring the return of all transferred funds. Every dollar came back. Patricia made sure of that. I signed the divorce papers on a Tuesday in February. It was cold that morning, the kind of gray Ohio cold that makes everything feel slightly unreal. I drove home from Patricia's office and pulled into my driveway and sat for a moment, and across the yard Russell was out checking his mailbox. He saw my car and raised his hand, the way he always does, the same small wave for 18 years. I waved back. There are things I think about now that I didn't have language for while it was happening. I think about how a long marriage can become its own kind of institution. How you stop looking closely because you believe you already know what's there. I think about how easy it is to build a false version of someone in another person's mind, especially when that person is far away and loves you and has no reason to question what you're telling them. I think about how my son and I lost nearly 2 years to a story that wasn't true, and how we're building something new now. Carefully, the way you build on ground that's been tested. He calls on Sundays. Sometimes we talk for 5 minutes, sometimes an hour. Last month he drove up and we spent a Saturday refinishing the back porch steps together. And at some point in the afternoon, he looked at the work we'd done and said it looked solid. I told him it would hold. Russell and I have coffee on his porch most Friday mornings now. I brought him a bottle of good bourbon at Christmas, and he told me he didn't need thanks, that he'd done what any neighbor would do. I told him most neighbors would have minded their own business. He considered that and poured himself a second cup. I still go to woodworking on Thursdays. I am making a bookcase, nothing fancy, just clean joinery and good oak and the satisfaction of knowing every joint is exactly where it should be. My instructor is a woman about my age who lost her husband 3 years ago and who has very strong opinions about wood grain and makes everyone in the class laugh at least once a session. I don't know where anything goes from here. I am 63 years old and I am living alone for the first time since I was 29, and some mornings that feels like loss, and some mornings it feels like something else entirely. What I know is this: 31 years of a life is not nothing, even when the ending is what it was. The woodworking is real. The coffee with Russell on Friday mornings is real. My son's voice on Sunday is real. The back porch steps are solid. And the red door I painted it navy blue in March. A small change. Enough.